listener production.
Hello, happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. The Australian Open has always blurred the line between elite sport and summer festival, but this year some are questioning the role of influencers and they're complaining about their ever-growing presence at the event.
I think that is the tension. If you want the tournament to be going in 20 years' time and to be healthy, you need to be attracting new audiences all the time. And I think that is the trade-off.
That deep dive into whether influencers are ruining the AO is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, it is time for the headlines with Chris Spiru on Friday, the 30th of January.
Hey Sash, Anthony Albanese has welcomed the state and territory leaders to his Sydney home for a dinner ahead of what's tipped to be a contentious national cabinet meeting today. The premiers and chief ministers will sit down with the Prime Minister to thrash out health funding, with the stalemate on the issue set to continue. The states have rejected the federal government's latest offer, which is a $23 billion funding injection for public hospitals over 5 years.
Yeah, they're calling for a significant increase to that figure. And this stoush over funding actually dates back to a promise made by the Albanese government in 2023 to increase its share of funding to 42.5% by 2030 and eventually 45% by 2035. Apparently what it's offering is well below that share. Also on the agenda today at National Cabinet, the NDIS and reining in spending on the scheme, as well as the national gun buyback, which the states are also stopping short of endorsing over a funding disagreement.
And also, while we're on the topic of politics, we were talking this time yesterday about a leadership challenge in the Nationals, and now the Liberal Party is facing a similar crisis. Only problem is they can't agree on who should challenge Susan Lee for the top job. We do know that Andrew Hastie and Angus Taylor met yesterday to discuss the issue before a funeral for a former colleague, but they came out of that meeting without a resolution, which, you know, is good news for Susan Lee, who some think might actually survive the latest attempt at removing her from the top job.
Pressure is continuing to mount on the Prime Minister to cancel his invitation to Israel's president to visit Australia next month. Isaac Herzog was invited by the Albanese government in the wake of the deadly Bondi terror attack in December. The PM had this to say at the time.
I've written to the Governor-General and asked for a formal invitation to be granted for the President to visit Australia in early 2026 to honour and remember victims of the Bondi anti-Semitic terrorist attack and provide support for Jewish Australians and the Australian Jewish community at this time.
So since then, he has faced pressure from a number of groups, including Labor's Internal Friends of Palestine, who fear Herzog's visit risks igniting further division.
And that point was also made by independent MP Sophie Scoms yesterday, as well as the leader of the Greens, Larissa Waters, who spoke to Tash about it on the show yesterday, Arvo.
I think it's very unfortunate that an invitation was issued to the president of a nation that is conducting a genocide, who was named in ICC documents surrounding the declaration that it is a genocide. That is not the way to foster social cohesion. I think that invitation should not have been issued, and I don't think it will help simmer down tensions.
The link to that chat will be in the show notes. Now, while Anthony Albanese yesterday defended the invitation, saying he looks forward to the president's visit and that he's linked it to building social cohesion in the country, we did get news overnight that a formal legal complaint has been lodged over it. The Australian National Imams Council last night releasing a statement saying it, as well as the Jewish Council of Australia, have filed a complaint with the Attorney General, Minister for Home Affairs and AFP, and they're calling for Herzog to not be allowed in the country, and also for the commencement of a criminal investigation into alleged war crimes and hate speech under Australian law. Now, we did hear from our Multicultural Affairs Minister yesterday, Anne Ali. She said that this invitation to the President was protocol. Like, this is what we do in the wake of a terrorist event or a great tragedy that's affected a community. We've also heard from the Shadow Foreign Minister, Michaelia Cash. This week, she said that the opposition welcomes the visit and that planned protests, so there are some planned protests right across the country during this time that he'll be here. She's called them deeply disappointing. And as to what we do know that state and federal police will be ramping up security between February 8 and February 12. Those are the dates that he is scheduled to be arriving down under.
It's then revealed the federal government has spent more money on handing out tax breaks for property investors than what it's spent on social housing, rent assistance and homelessness services combined. That is according to the latest research by the Australian Council of Social Service. So to break it down, tax concessions for landlords reached $12.3 billion in 2025, while spending on Labor's key housing assistance program sat at $9.6 billion.
Yeah, and a reminder, addressing the housing crisis was one of the party's big election pitches, including boosting social housing and handing out more cash for help with rent. Data from the Productivity Commission shows the share of homes dedicated to social housing is at a record low of 3.6%, while the number of people on the wait list has increased to around 190,000, up from 169,000 in 2024. This new report, Sash, has prompted calls once again for the government to abolish capital gains and negative gearing tax concessions.
Australian health authorities say they're closely monitoring the spread of a potentially deadly virus as airports across Asia tighten their screening procedures. This comes after 2 people in India tested positive for Nipah virus, which according to the World Health Organization has a fatality rate of between 40 and 75%.
Bali's International Airport has become the latest to revive its COVID-era procedures, introducing 4 thermal scanners to detect the virus, advising all travellers to notify airport or quarantine officers if they feel unwell or show any of the symptoms. And as to those symptoms, we know that they're similar to the flu, and they include things like fever, fatigue, muscle pain, vomiting, cough, shortness of breath and sore throat. What we do know about this virus as well is that it's transmitted from animals to humans, but human-to-human transmission is reportedly less common. Health Minister Mark Butler says Australia is engaging with the WHO and will follow all relevant health advice, acknowledging that the virus is pretty rare and there are currently no treatment or vaccine options for this virus.
And let's wrap up the week at the briefing's new spiritual home, I feel, the Australian Open. Sorry if you hate sport and you hate tennis. I promise we're nearly done. The comp wraps on Sunday, so you've only got maybe one more day of headlines to get through where you have to hear us talk about the tennis tournament. And the women's finalists have been decided. Aryna Sabalenka has booked her 4th consecutive decider at the Grand Slam. She beat Alina Svitolina in front of a packed Rod Laver Arena last night.
I cannot believe that, honestly, and that's incredible achievement, but the job not done yet.
On 9 there, she'll be facing off against Alina Rybakina, who had a straight sets win over Jess Pegula also last night.
And you thought we were out, but there's also some exciting news for the Aussies at the Australian Open.
The Australians are off to the decider.
6-2, 3-6.
Jason Kubler and Mark Polmans have found a way.
Yes, that is, of course, our wild cards, Jason Kubler and Mark Polmans, winning through to the men's double final, which is scheduled for Saturday. Today, though, we've got the men's semis kicking off at around 2:30 this arvo with Carlos Alcaraz taking on Alexander Zverev. Then it's Djokovic versus Sinner tonight. And also, we have the mixed doubles final today, the very last game for the mixed doubles. And that is featuring our very own Aussies, Olivia Gadecki and John Peers. They're taking on a French duo at some time today. And meantime, off the court, we have that privacy drama still swirling, don't we?
Yeah, it hasn't simmered down. In fact, Tennis Australia's responded because quite a few players talked about it after Coco Gauff was filmed smashing her racket in the tunnels and then basically complaining that she felt like there was nowhere she could go to kind of escape the cameras and escape the gaze of the public. Craig Tiley, who's the boss of Tennis Australia, has come out to say, look, we're open to making changes and we'll listen to the players. We've heard from Djokovic. We also heard from Igor Swiatek. So, yeah, we can maybe expect to see some changes around where the cameras are at next year's Oz Open. But for now, that's it from us.
It is. And it is actually my deep dive keeping you in the loop with more tennis drama.
Sorry.
So sorry if you're not a tennis fan. But this next dive is really, really interesting. It's about influencers who have swarmed to the AO this year, why they're there, and why they might just be the key to the sport's survival. Stick around. That deep dive is coming up for you next. Well, we're used to the antics of the players on centre court. There's been another drama unfolding at the Australian Open in 2026, and it's all to do with influencers. Tennis fans have been speaking out this year about the event becoming a content creator's paradise, invited to the most luxe events and snagging the best seats. But is it actually coming at the expense of the quote-unquote real fans? Ben Clare is the creative director at social media agency We Are Social. He's written in defense of influencers at the AO, and he joins me now. Ben, welcome to the briefing. Before we get into the controversy, I want to talk money and the inner workings of these deals. Who's paying for an influencer to be at the AO, and what exactly are they paying for?
It's an excellent question, Chris, and it is extremely varied. So most of the money that is being exchanged at the Oz Open is taking place between brands, the Australian Open sponsorship partners, and the influencers and creators. And that transaction can vary wildly. It could be something as simple as exclusive access to the grounds. It could be seats courtside at a tennis event. It could be of a monetary value, like up to the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's a fairly extreme spectrum there, and it depends on your level of influence.
In terms of the type of creators being sent or being asked to go to the AO, based on how you've looked at it, is there a certain type of creator that the AO is attracting or that is at the AO this year?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely like a younger cohort. And I think that's because Tennis Australia has publicly stated that they are targeting Gen Z. And I think you'll look at that through the types of sponsors that they're attracting. This year, they've brought on board brands like Nipah, Red Bull, Fortress, which is, a gaming brand. So they're very clearly targeting a Gen Z audience. And that suggests to me their strategy is to bring in an entirely, new generation of fans that perhaps previously weren't interested in tennis, or perhaps they're being, attracted through those brands, and then they'll hopefully stay for the tennis.
And it seems to be working in some capacity. At least this year, we know we've got some record numbers of people rocking up to Melbourne Park. Very long wait times. People are pissed because some people are waiting up to 4 to 5 hours. And then when they do eventually get in to take their seat, these arenas are full of influencers, quote unquote, full of influencers. But your view is that influencers aren't exactly stealing seats, rather they're, quote, subsidizing them. Let's unpack that.
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting one, right? And just for a bit of context there, I think this started a couple of years ago when Tennis Australia outright decided to transform the Australian Open into a 3-week cultural festival, right? They've explicitly positioned this as more than a tennis tournament. There's live music, there's rooftop bars, there's celebrity chefs. There is so much going on beyond just the actual sport inside the arenas. And I think it's really hard to manufacture that scale of cultural relevance and then sort of act shocked when the festival crowd turn up. To the point around the subsidization, these influencers are part of the broader economic model that keeps the tournament viable, right? The sponsorship dollars that come from all of the brand activations in and around the tournament help subsidize everything from prize money to the infrastructure to keeping, general admission tickets from being even more expensive than they actually are. And I guess the Tennis Australia's strategy is to make tennis feel relevant to a generation who perhaps wouldn't be interested otherwise. And I would say that those influencers aren't exclusively there to promote the tournament. They're there to help promote all of those adjacent sponsors and all their brand activations and create some cultural affinity that will serve those brands well.
You've also framed this controversy, if that's what we want to call it, controversy or latest drama, as something that very much looks like heritage versus relevance. What do you mean by that?
I'm sure everyone would like to pretend that, major sporting events run on passion alone. And I think, tennis purists, they want reverence. And I don't blame them. I think when you're really passionate about sport, you have earned your fandom through years of devotion, right? And I think they see influencers as these interlopers that are, just there for fit pics and champagne, not the sport. They want everyone that's in attendance to know their top spin from their slice. And, they want them to have suffered through those 5-set epics. And so I think they sort of see influencers who may leave a seat halfway through a match as not there in the service of the game. But I think in just sort of having that argument, by policing who deserves to be at the Oz Open, I think we're ignoring the commercial reality of what keeps these tournaments alive. I think that is the tension. If you want the tournament to be going in 20 years' time and to be healthy, you need to be attracting new audiences all the time. And I think that is the trade-off. The growth of the game, it requires attracting people who aren't yet fans.
It's interesting because this idea of festivalizing sport is not something unique to tennis. Like you mentioned, it's very firmly part of their new strategy, but it's something that we've also seen with the F1. Strangely enough, we also see it in horse racing and the way that industry is trying to court younger Australians as well. We don't exactly see it in the NRL or the AFL. Do you think that's something that's going to change anytime soon?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I guess maybe the key difference there is that these are sort of singular events. Like the Oz Open obviously lasts for 3 weeks and it is an enormous event. But I guess when you have these season-long sports like the NRL or the AFL, it's much harder to sustain that cultural relevance over 26, 28 weeks. And whether or not the attraction of those younger audiences is as important to those sports that, I guess, earn their fandom through, family devotion and whatnot, it may not be as big a priority, but I certainly think that we will see more and more influencers at more and more sporting events the world over. As you say, it's already a massive reality for events like the F1, for the Super Bowl taking place next week, at the NBA, a lot of American sports. Influencers, they make the problem fairly visible. And I think that is why it's become such a talking point this year round.
Well, visibility is another, aspect to this that you've written about. You've said that traditionally we're fine with transactional fandom when it's hidden, but influencers make that transaction visible, and that's what seems to be bugging people this year. So is the issue really with influencers being involved in sport in some capacity, or is it our discomfort at just seeing how these systems operate?
There has been transactional fandom at sports for decades. Corporate boxes have existed just about as long as, sporting events have been taking place. And they have always been full of disengaged people. We just didn't always see their Instagram stories. And I think that's the kind of difference. Influencers document everything. And by doing so, they make that exchange explicit. I'm here because a brand paid me to be here. And I think that, that doesn't always sit well with people, especially if, they aren't adhering to the etiquette of the game.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing a lot more red sunglasses in the stands of the AO come 2027. It's always fun to watch. And I'm excited to see if this debate will continue next year. I mean, I don't see it dying anytime soon, but I guess we'll wait and see.
No, I'm sure it will continue to be debated. Thank you so much for having me on, Chris.
That was Creative Director at social media agency We Are Social, Ben Clare, speaking with me there. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. And don't forget, we've got the weekend briefing tomorrow where Sash chats with TikTok's creator of the year, Eli Matangi.
My girls, they know that they're famous because the amount of attention we get when we go out in public and stuff. But I guess they don't really understand fully, there is other stuff that people will say. There is such a darker side. And as a parent, I feel like everything starts at home. It's my full responsibility to not protect them, but just educate them and make sure that they're as well prepared as possible.
That will be in your feeds from tomorrow morning. I'm Chris Spear. I'll catch you next time.